Hello, everybody. Welcome and thank you for tuning in to listen to this presentation about PhysioYoga. I first want to introduce myself and explain why I'm speaking today. My name is Katrin Richie, and I am entering my final year of my Master's of Physical Therapy at the University of Saskatchewan. This year, I took part in a combined research project and clinical placement. For the research portion, we looked at the benefits of yoga in women. And for the clinical portion, I was lucky to get to spend time in 2 PhysioYoga studios here in Saskatoon. This was the first time a student from the U of S took place in a PhysioYoga placement, and I have to be honest, before I signed up for the project, I didn't really know much about PhysioYoga. But when I saw the option, I thought I have to be involved because I have a personal interest in yoga, and I love the physical challenge it presents me with. But I also love the opportunity for a guided meditation, and I just noticed so many benefits from attending classes over the years, from strength and flexibility to things like mindfulness, relaxing, and a recharge or renewal in mental energy, which are very important when you're a university student. So I thought, if there's physios out there working to incorporate this philosophy into their practice, I have to know more. It was very exciting and I had to be a part of it. Before the placement, I'd taken part in some yoga workshops, but I'd never had any formal teacher training in yoga. So other than having some knowledge of the physical poses, the yoga stuff was all kind of new to me. So starting in March, I connected with Shelley Prosco, who's been a wonderful mentor to me and helped me to understand some of the background and theory of yoga, as well as looking at it as a framework to integrating yoga into rehabilitation. So now that you know me and where I'm coming from, we can fast forward to July when I joined Adrian and the team at Vangool Wellness for 4 weeks to see it all in action, and finally start talking about why we're all here. What is PhysioYoga? So Adrian asked me this question during my first week in the clinic, and as I'm fairly new to this concept, we thought it would be interesting and fun to write down my definition of PhysioYoga at the start of the placement and then revisit the question at the end of the placement. So here it is, my definition of PhysioYoga at the beginning of the placement. PhysioYoga is bringing together physio and yoga, bringing together the best of both worlds. I remember having difficulty trying to come up with a definition in the moment. I was more focused on how to practice PhysioYoga, and while I was starting to see the many forms it could take, I hadn't really started to think about what the outcome or goal was, or what we were trying to achieve. So even though I will let you know what my definition is now at the end of the 4 weeks, I really want to share with you some of my experiences and examples of how I've seen PhysioYoga practiced that help me to understand what it is. Also to share some of the things that surprised me about PhysioYoga and ways it might be incorporated into school, the workplace, or even at home. So the first thing I want to talk about is yoga. And often yoga is thought as a series of complex poses, people standing on their heads or doing the splits, and things that sound pretty intimidating and not very accessible to the average person. But what I've learned is that yoga has so much more to offer than that. It's a wellness system that does consider movement and postures, but also ethics for how you treat yourself and others. It recognizes the importance of breath and regulating the breath, and concentration in the mind, self-inquiry, and connection. And these concepts, which are known as the 8 limbs, were one of the first things Adrian and I discussed in our first week, and integrating all of them into a treatment session because, as I mentioned before, yoga is so much more than just poses. And I have an example to help explain this. So one of the things we did at the start of every appointment was a centering or meditative sequence. And this did look different for every client. Some were more comfortable with more of a conversational tone. Others preferred more of a guided centering. and just allowing people to sit and create space for whatever it was to come up. It was so powerful to see. I would watch shoulders drop, physically fall away from people's ears as they went through this process. During that time, I would also see people starting to connect into their breath and breathe deeply. And what's really cool about that is that's also physio, because being able to take a full deep breath instead of short and shallow breaths, we talk about it a lot in school, and there's so many benefits. And that's where most of the blood vessels run through the lungs, and it increases potential to get oxygen to the bloodstream and to the muscles. But that centering sequence, the self-check-in, everything from creating a space of acceptance and non-judgment where people feel safe so they can relax and start to let go and bring some awareness to their body, that part I hadn't observed to be common in physio appointments. The physio will always check in with the client, but the opportunity for the client to check in with themselves isn't always there. So I think that's a really nice example of how physio and yoga can work together. And now it might be a little more clear why my initial definition was the best of both worlds. But I think it's so important for a physio to be able to help people create body awareness, especially interoception, or being in tune with how the body is feeling. And Adrienne would talk about this with clients. She'd say, listen to the whispers, the subtle cues that the body is telling you. And this was important for the clients we had, which were primarily people who experienced a lot of stress, chronic pain, or chronic fatigue. I mean, it is important for any injury, but especially with chronic pain, as sometimes you can start to dissociate from those areas of the body, and losing that connection can result in maybe overdoing it, or an inflammation response, a flare-up, and in some cases, the inability to do anything for a couple of days other than recover. So it's also a tool that people can use in coping and self-management, a tool to prevent large fluctuations in health, and that self-awareness can be really empowering. So switching gears here just a bit, I'd like to talk about another big part of the placement, which was teaching classes. And I want to use this experience as an example to explain how physio knowledge and rationale can guide what physio poses are chosen as a part of the treatment. So during the placement, I taught PhysioYoga for beginners, which was so much fun, but it turned out that many of the students were runners. So we decided to take what we know as physios about running and optimal running form and design a class that was focused or geared towards the runner. The physio knowledge for the class came from Julie Wiebe and the idea that allowing thoracic rotation when you're running will allow for greater hip extension on the opposite side that you are rotating towards. So you'll essentially get a longer stride length and therefore more glute activation during running. So the class included both education on running, technique, and poses geared towards those movements, but it was more than that as well. We looked at finding a neutral pelvis, we looked at breathing, we looked at the plantar fascia, a lot of things that are important to runners. But I wanted to use this as an example of how the physio concepts guide the treatment and how yoga is integrated into treatment. And this does not only apply to the classes, but to the one-on-one appointments as well. The client's goals and needs guide which poses are included in the treatment session. So kind of like a specialty tailored class for the individual. I think it's so important to have the goal in mind when incorporating a pose, because as a physio, we know about alignment and biomechanics. You know, it's not important to us that the person in front of us has the best looking tree pose out there. So that's a pose where you're standing on one leg, but that in the tree pose, they're activating the muscle for which the pose was chosen, or that the pose can be modified to give them the proper support to safely do the pose and activate that glute on the stance leg, for example. So in that way, a pose can be more of a tool for which we can achieve the goal. It's a little bit of a different approach to traditional physio exercises, but staying true to the physio knowledge. And I'd just like to make a comment here that the centering example would incorporate more yoga philosophy into the treatment, where choosing some yoga poses to address a certain injury might fall closer to a traditional physio approach. So if those were on different ends of a spectrum, physio yoga can fall anywhere in between. There's no right or wrong way to do it. The level of yoga incorporated will depend on the physio's level of comfort and experience. But that's not to say using the poses as exercises is wrong, because many yoga poses are functional movement. You know, you're on your hands and knees, you're in a squat, you're in a lunge. If you've tried it, you know you're getting a really good workout in strength, balance, coordination, and flexibility. You're challenging yourself in ways that life will challenge you every day. So moving on to what surprised me in my placement, the first one is that physio yoga is also for the practitioner. And I have to say, this was a really nice surprise. But there is an emphasis on self-compassion and taking the tools of how to take care of yourself, helping with coping and stress management, and how to be kind to yourself, and then applying them to your own life. Because as physios, we help other people be well. And in order to do that, we need to be well as well. Physically, yes, but mentally and spiritually too. To be fully present for whoever is before us, and to be able to stay present and not disconnect. And this is one way to achieve wellness. I think that this is also an area where wellness could be integrated into physio school or the workplace or at home. But by practicing self-care or compassion in the classroom or on the job, it could start with 1 or 2 minutes of self-care each day. I am, of course, envisioning a meditation, but it doesn't have to be that, but maybe in the morning or after lunch, and doing that consistently. In my schooling experience, there was one class where we practiced meditation, but it would help students to learn how to have their own practice and build a consistent practice, which is key to for it to become a lifelong habit. The second thing that surprised me are props, and props are so fantastic. There's pillows, blankets, foam blocks, cork blocks, bolsters, chairs, you name it. Props can help support proper alignment for stretching. They can be used for modifications, for example, a strap used to elongate a limb for a person with limited range, or a block for a person that may be not able to reach the floor. They can fill gaps in the body's natural position, like a blanket at the curve of the back or at the neck, and they provide support and allow for tension to be released. I think the bottom line is, if you want to be comfortable, props are going to be your best friend. And using props is not associated with being less. They're just another way we can be kind to ourselves and allow us to get more out of our practice. And this comes to my final surprise, which is the language of yoga. So this was a surprise and a challenge for me, but learning how to use the language of yoga is another way to integrate yoga philosophy into a treatment session. And this was particularly difficult for me because I was terrified of, saying the wrong thing or not using the right words or the right cues. But as I got into the placement and started practicing, I realized it was less about the words you chose and more about the message. For example, the message of self-compassion. But personally, it was important for me to invest some time in finding out what cues I liked and found to be effective. And also finding a way to communicate, finding a common language for which I, as a therapist, could understand the client. And I actually experienced this firsthand on my last day. A client noticed that the language that was intended to help them relax was actually causing them to feel as though they needed to strive to achieve a state of relaxation. And that's not very relaxing. but they were able to identify that language such as softening or letting go resonated with them and was more effective. So after considering all of my experience, I came to a new definition at the end of the 4 weeks. PhysioYoga is an approach taken to improve health, rehabilitate injury, or manage pain and disease, where the focus is on whole person wellness, including body, mind, and spirit. And I left it at that because I'm continuing on this journey, and I'm sure my definition will be modified as I grow as a therapist, and I'm excited to continue to practice and learn. So thank you for tuning in tonight and joining me. It's so amazing to see all this interest in physio yoga.